morning, Bitcoiners. Hello, David. Hope you're doing well. We got a GM. We got a GM from B for Victory. Good morning, Bitcoiners. Indeed, good morning. We got a morning from PH. Morning, PH. Hope you're doing well. Hope everyone's doing great. We got a P-Man Van saying, good morning, all. Indeed, good morning, all. To all who have witnessed our beautiful sunrise today, it was a good one. Right? It was a great one. And guess what? Guess what I heard? I didn't confirm it, but I've heard it's okay. I didn't really look. I didn't, know transactions or anything this morning, but it looks like Bitcoin's running. I didn't check before I got on, but usually I do. So all that's left for us to do is have a coffee and talk about what's new. Excellent. Coffee time with the sun, King Mansa Musa. Indeed, it is coffee time with the sun. We get a good morning and a coffee from Bitcoin Graffiti. I hope Bitcoin Graffiti is okay with drinking coffee in the early afternoon over in Europe. I love the coffee in Europe, so I drink it in the early afternoons. I quit coffee at around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. That's my last cup. I don't like to have it anytime after that. Morning, Bitcoiners. You're not here to hear about my coffee schedule. I know that. You're here for some Moscow time. All day started Bitcoin Graffiti says. I wish I was one of those people. I've long wished I could be a coffee at night person because I love coffee after dinner and things like that, but I just can't handle it. I'm a light sleeper. That's why I don't drink alcohol. I have no, alcohol's fun. It's poison, but it's fun. But I can't sleep, so I just don't do it. I'm just not into it, and then also working in events for as long as I have forced me to learn how to be socialized, right? Because I would be up all day working, out all night because there's things going on with all the events that I've been doing. Consensus always has side events. Bitcoin Magazine, they're going to be amazing side events in 2 weeks, right? There's always stuff going on at night. So I had to train myself because I would be on stage the next day. You just can't do it, right? You just can't. So it's been years of going out and not drinking in order to preserve my professional capacity, which is fun, So I got used to it. So I'm over it, right? We don't need to bother. But it's really because of the sleep. I can't sleep, right? So that's the problem. So let's get to Moscow time. Now, today we're going to pour one out for Vice Media. If you guys didn't hear, poor Vice, it's a Montreal institution. It comes from Montreal. I remember reading it. I didn't even like it in its early days. People always say, oh, the early days were great. Were they? Were they really? I never got it. I really never got it. I was not a fan from the beginning. I found it a little vulgar to begin with. But it was very common when I was a teenager to see it in people's apartments. In Montreal, I don't know if people realize this, but because we go to junior college, we don't have junior high at all. We go from elementary to high school. High school ends in grade 11. So most people's junior year of college, it's over, right? So they're the year before junior year of high school. Geez, get these things straight. So we have 5 years of high school, which begin in our grade 7. So when we're 12 and we go to age 16, grade 11. So there's no middle school. That's different than the rest of Canada. Canada has the same as the United States: elementary school, junior high, high school. Then you go on to university and college. In Quebec, we would do undergrad. What am I talking about? We would do elementary school, and then we would go to high school. High school's over in grade 11. And then we go to junior college. Junior college is 2 years, and it ends up counting as our first year of university. So we actually only go to university for 3 years, not 4, like everyone else. So for my case, when I transferred or when I left Quebec and went to Waterloo, Ontario, I only had 3 years of college. Whereas if people come to Montreal for school, they do 4. If I would go to Montreal College as well, I would have only gone for 3. So we just don't get a lot of electives because of that. So they're almost all accounted for by the credits we end up getting from our junior college. All this to say, we're really young when we move out and we have apartments. I had an apartment in downtown Montreal when I was 16 years old. Very typical, especially of English Quebecers. French Quebecers have access to more local Cégeps, they're called, Collège d'études générales et professionnelles. English do not. We have to move away. Depending on where you live. If you live in Montreal, you have plenty of choice. If you live in Quebec City, there's one. There's also one out in where I live, but about equidistant to Montreal from where I grew up. So an hour east versus me traveling an hour west to go to Montreal and college there. So I was right in the middle of the two places where I could have gone to English college. So I just had to move to Montreal. You just have to move there and go to school, and it's fun. But it was, Montreal has always been a pretty affordable, inexpensive city. 3 16-year-olds working in restaurants can easily pay rent, especially then. So one of the things you saw in all of my friends who had apartments in the city, all of the people that I would encounter, everyone had this Vice magazine. I was never a fan, right? Really, I wasn't. But they're done, right? They're out of business. So they're filing for bankruptcy. All their writers are out. So we got to take a moment to see the journalism that we're missing out on now that they're out of business, right? So there's a kind of a best of here. And I'm just going to read you some of the amazing headlines they've had over the years and just, pour one out to what we're losing. It's really sad. Moscow Time has lost an important source, guys. So I'm a little perturbed this morning by all of this because we just won't have the supply. Not that I was going to Vice often for Moscow Time, but I always knew it was there, right? I always knew we had the potential to put a Vice headline on, and it would have fulfilled what we needed. It's as big a loss. It's as big a loss as, let's say, if MSNBC just tried to play the news straight, or the Atlantic. If the Atlantic just played it straight, I would lose a little bit of content here. So we're going to have to pull up our pants from now on and try a little harder with Moscow Time. But we get one last dose of the Vice magazine headlines here. So let's see what Moscow Time has to say in the best of Vice media over time. Here's one. So they've laid off 155 writers, filed for bankruptcy. All right, so here's the first one. The Girl's Guide to Tucking Your Dick. Are you ready to learn? Maybe. Yes, there are trans animals. Many people think there's an absolute biological distinction between males and females. These animals prove them wrong. That's actually true. That's not fake news. That's actually true. There's a lot of those. So thank you, Vice. That's less fake news than we're used to. Here's a good one. Why some men choose to surgically remove their penis. Transgender medical treatment, I was going to say experiment, but it's not. It says treatment, is more widely accepted today, but surgeries remain fixed along binary lines. Uh-oh. There are some men who don't conform to either male or female. That's actually true. And they just want their penis and testicles totally removed. Okay. A modest take on why men traumatize women with poop. This week, a man shoved a bag of shit down a woman's shorts. It wasn't the first time excrement was used in this way, and it won't be the last. I'm interested in that one. Here's a really great one. Actually, Trump is a witch hunter, says male witch community. Donald Trump has complained that investigations into him constitute the single greatest witch hunt of a politician in American history. Male witches say otherwise. Here's one. A trans woman who became a dragon. I spent a day with Eva Tiamat Medusa, a trans woman who modified her body to become a dragon. Okay. Having multiple devoted boyfriends is wonderful, polyandrous women confirm. In polyandry, women have multiple male partners, all of whom are totally devoted to them. We spoke to several women in polyandrous relationships to find out what it's like. So normally there's not much of a difference. Women and men differences, they don't exist, except in this instance when women are better, right? So women are better at coding than men. You didn't know. Despite misogynistic suggestions that women have no place in STEM, who's saying that? I just pause. Who's saying women have no place in STEM? I've never heard that in my life. Anyway, new research shows that women's code is actually viewed more favorably by their peers, as long as their gender is kept concealed. This one's great because they do sometimes, it's not just the witch hunt articles that when they wade into absolute politics, they also come in this way. 32 unbearably cute things about Beto O'Rourke. Beto. Don't mess with Texas's only politician who will gladly nurse a blind squirrel back to life. That's what he did. Now, this is another in the theme of everybody's the same. There's no differences between male and females, but women are actually better when it counts. Women make better doctors, but they face discrimination and burnout. A shockingly high amount of female physicians report facing discrimination on the job, according to a new study published in the JAMA Internal Medicine Journal. Here's an important one. How to know if you are a hipster racist, right? It's a variant of the racist category. Take it from me, your black friend. I know the signs. So we're going to miss out on all of this stuff going forward, guys. And I don't know what I'm going to do. I've just lost a real source of Moscow time, but we'll get over it. There's other stuff out there, right? There's plenty of other sources. So I think I'll be okay. Here's one from commenting on Tucker Carlson's turmoil. So here's what it says. Isn't a male witch called a male witch? Everyone picked up on the male witch. Yeah, no, apparently there are. Isn't male called a warlock? I think so, or a wizard. Here's what this piece says. His reputation is in tatters. Tucker Carlson's career in turmoil after Fox News firing, as no major networks will touch him. Has anyone seen what his little trailer is up to? It's at around 25 million views of that 2-minute trailer. And no one's going to touch him. I agree. NBC and none of the major networks are going to touch him. I agree with that. But it would be a little bit like saying no major bank is going to hire Francis Pouliot. Or no major bank is going to hire Marty Bent. It's the same thing, right? The doubt it's happening. Andreas Antonopoulos denied employment from all major banks. That's what's happening. So the video did indeed get millions of votes. And it actually, I think anyway, has caused a lot of discussion about whether Tucker would go exclusively on Twitter. A lot of people talking about that. And just yesterday, you had Elon Musk practicing his video, right? So Elon Musk put out a video on Periscope, just like I've been doing. You know, people forget that Periscope isn't totally out of date. I've been using Periscope for a while, and I was wondering if Elon was going to use Periscope in his video reboot of Twitter. And it looks like it. So he went on and got millions of views just for talking into the camera, talked about how terrible the quality was. If you haven't seen the video, he's just laughing at the hearts. You know, he wants to get the hearts out. And he wants to get Montreal Canadiens won't draft my grandpa. Yeah, they're not going to do that, P-Man. Elon shared this tweet yesterday talking about what his plans are. So he did the Twitter video yesterday. He didn't even know it was on. It was live. He got up to nearly 1 million viewers within 4 minutes. That's how long the video was. Or when I turned it off, it was moving into the many hundreds of thousands very quickly, and it was at the top of everyone's feed. And he was marveling at the low resolution and how they need to fix that, and that it should be an easy fix to get rid of the hearts. I indeed believe get rid of the hearts is a problem, because anytime you even try and scroll, you end up hearting a video. I don't know if you guys have noticed that, but and then, you know, even on my own, sometimes I've looked at my own videos and on Periscope, especially when I had to fast forward them because I had the outdoor scenes to begin with. So I'd fast forward that on the Periscope experience. And every time I hearted my own video, and then it shows who's hearted their own videos. And if I only had like 2 hearts, it's like disingenuous that I'm hearting my own videos. So I didn't like it. You know, I just wanted the choice. But here's what Elon says about video. So he says, the more screen time users spend looking at a post, whether text, pic, or video, the more it is boosted. Video posted natively on this platform will be boosted more than an external link, because way more time is spent watching a video than clicking on a link. So it looks like they're going to be serious about putting this new video journalism up. And I think it's going to be a good thing. I mean, you saw Tucker approach it immediately. He got 25 million views. Way more, blew every one of the networks out of the water in real time, right? I think he had 4 or 5 million views the day it came out when I first mentioned it here, and he ended up having, you know, millions of views that followed, way more than they're getting in any mainstream media broadcast or cable news broadcast in the evening. Of course, CNN, nowhere near those numbers. Fox, since Tucker left, the ratings are absolutely plummeting, and so we're left with this opening, with a void, right? And it looks like the void, first of all, isn't going to be filled. Look at what the brain dead normal journalists have done here. So of course NPR, um, uh, not posting from the handle NPR after Twitter and Elon Musk labeled them as state-sponsored media. But the actual journalists working for NPR, of course, are still posting. They're addicted. They can't get away from it. And they're sitting around buying blue checks and saying that they don't care for it. So what happened was this journalist, Bobby Aline, tweeted something that was supposed to be a negative article on NPR, on Elon and Twitter. So what they did was so in a series of emails today, Elon threatened to reassign NPR to another company. So he's taking the handle NPR, assigning it to another company. And they tried to publish this stuff, right? So NPR is saying, oh, they're threatening us. We need to deal with this, right? And then he wrote an article on NPR cataloging this entire narrative, this story that he's saying happened. And he says then, since for some reason the story appears to be blocked, right? I'm pasting the whole story. So he says it's blocked, right? Bobby Aline, who wrote it, says, now Twitter is blocking NPR stories that are critical of him, right? So of course, Aaron Rupar, right? We all know Aaron Rupar from such hoaxes as the Charlottesville hoax, the drinking bleach hoax. He's a video editor who removes context. He's like the opposite of community notes, right? He removes context to bamboozle people. Glenn Greenwald has taken aim at him and has been smashing him for a little while now. But here he is, right? He says, Musk is now totally blocking links to unflattering stories, such as the one below. Very normal behavior. And then another fella, Justin Barogana, who also is one of these, what is Elon doing? People with cognitive dissonance. Just to show you how truly petty Elon Musk is, you can't open this link to the NPR story on their site. But the problem was all the time that they posted a bad link. But the important lesson here is not that they're stupid. It's that they don't do the job of journalists. No one bothered checking. Did you read the article type of thing, right? So they tried to click and it didn't work. And then immediately it was, oh, Elon is out to get us. But it turns out that all they did was have a bad link and they never bothered checking it, right? And AG Hamilton here says, seems like it might have been worthwhile for some of these people to check if it was just a bad link before running the claim that the platform was blocking a story, right? So they didn't bother. They just went, typically journalists are actually supposed to spend a few minutes at least, right? Maybe not hours investigating, but a few minutes, and they decided not to. So that's how you end up getting these ridiculous takes. But let's go back to just this idea of the decentralizing forces that are now awakened in just media itself, right? Can we ever go back to not having citizen journalists? And the tools that citizen journalists have are only going to get better. You go into these spaces in the evening and you're getting 3 hours of content. The ones that I go on with Mario Nawfal and those groups all on AI, we go for 3 hours. You get some of the most interesting and intelligent people that roll in. And this level of conversation is simply not attainable. And the Mario Nawfal ones, there's a show to it. People don't get along and they disagree in order to just add a bit of spice in those things. But nevertheless, it is a pretty high quality show, especially with the guests that they get on. So you have that. And now if Twitter adds video, you're going to see all sorts of new things. And you get, Rickster Swickster here mentioning that Patrick Beth David has offered Tucker $100 million. He didn't just offer Tucker $100 million for 5 years. He offered him more or less a partnership in this company. So is Newsmax. If you haven't noticed, Newsmax is offering Tucker more or less control of programming. They're saying, here's equity in the company, and you don't just have to do your own show. You can give us advice on all of the shows, every show, right, on the entire network's programming. So they're offering him more of 79 million. Whoa, his video is at 79 million. Geez Louise, I didn't know that. I thought it was at 25 the last time I checked, but I'm out of date. So 79 million. Whoa, career's done. He only got 79 million views on a 2-minute trailer about telling the other side of the story. So there you go. Now Elon, of course, focusing on this piece around media. So that's just the news media, right? That's just the news media and the decentralizing forces that we've all seen. We talk about a lot, but there's more. It's not just the news media that's getting caught up in this trend, right? It's a trend towards decentralization that we see all around. The next one that I have is this writer's strike. Have you seen this writer's strike? Everyone talking about the Hollywood writer's strike that's going on. So it turns out that Jimmy Kimmel, all the late night guys, the late night comedy shows are shut down as the Hollywood writers vote to strike for the first time in 15 years over low pay due to the explosion of streaming services. And then Liz Cronkin says, good news keeps on coming. These are the least funny people in the world. But Nathaniel Whitmore, who runs the Breakdown, right? Not the Breakup. He's the opposite. It's the Breakdown, right? But I know Nathaniel. And Nathaniel writes this. So the Writers Guild of America is on strike. One of the concerns is competition from AI. Even if the strike is totally justified from an efficacy standpoint, doesn't it create the perfect incentive and opportunity ever for studios to try to replace writers with AI? Indeed. I mean, they're giving them all the reasons in the world right now. I've seen people throwing up scripts on ChatGPT. Now, they don't really get humor yet, the AI. It's not exactly there, right? It's still missing a bit of the formula of humor. But it'll learn it, I think. I think it can learn it. Now, I get it. Jokes do require a lot of feedback. You know, one of the things that I often say in the spaces that we're talking about here, or in the spaces about AI, is that one of the interesting things humans can do, and one of the things that we didn't realize, one of the things I put in my book, Satoshi Wedding Murders, about AI, that a lot of people didn't anticipate at first, is that actually, in order for AI to seem more like humans, it has to be a little dumber. And by dumber, I mean make mistakes, right? Because humor, if you've listened to any one of these stand-up guys, you know, Eddie Murphy, for example, he'll say it's like training. You've got to get in front of an audience and literally fail a few times in order to hone a joke. And in my experience, all great art, you know, even when I work on the show, right, I think of the Bitcoin Magazine show as a type of canvas. I always tell people when they say, oh, that's a stupid idea, you have to not be afraid of stupid ideas, right? You put things on the canvas and 9 out of 10 things you put on there are dumb. It's the ability to sift through the bad stuff to find the good thing that makes it great. Now, some people always imagine that when AI figures out humor, it'll just shoot 100 for 100, right? 100%. It's not that simple. In fact, it is the honing, sharpening of ideas from failure, even in a small sense, right? Try this, try that. It's terrible, it's terrible, it's terrible. 9 times in a row, it's terrible. And then it clicks and then you get it. And then there's the reaction you're after and you have it, right? Stephen King, I've mentioned him before on this, his masterpiece On Writing. It really is his masterpiece. It's one of the most amazing books you'll ever read. You know, he knows about writing, that's for sure. And he always calls that killing your babies, right? Because you put something out there, you've got some ego mixed with it, and then you don't really want to let it go. And it's hard to let it go because you think it's great, but when you don't have that feedback and it's just not clicking, you got to keep trying it and try iterations and A/B test it and all those things. So humor and even art and having a connection and a rapport with audience has a lot to do with getting things wrong. And AI, in my opinion, had to learn that before it would get in the game. And you can see it. So that it makes mistakes in comedy now is actually a good sign because it's learning and honing, and it will learn, right? I still don't think it'll hit 10 for 10 when it comes up with jokes, but it'll get closer. It'll probably get better than humans, right? Once it figures out some of the formula and knows how to get feedback and iterate, right? So now what we have is AI with this vacuum, right? In the same way that the mainstream media, as it continues to fail at offering people interesting narratives and it continues to bleed audience and lose talent, like people like Tucker and others, right? There's other people leaving this system in order to go on their own. If you just look at Substack for a minute and you find out the amount of talent that's there, the Matt Taibbis and all of these people who no longer work for corporate media, work individually and for themselves. and now have more tools coming to the forefront that are going to allow them to A/B test more, connect with audiences more, push out more content with less production overhead, with less difficulty. Even myself here trying to limit my production footprint so that I can replicate every day and get better and better content, right? If I'm spending less time stressed about how to get going live, the content is just going to get better, and those tools are getting there. But here's what I predict, and it's something that I've predicted for a long time. Have you guys seen this genre that's out now where movies are getting an AI filter through them? I think one of the ones that's gone viral is the Wes Anderson Star Wars version, right? Where he's like Bill Murray is Han Solo, I think, and you get all these characters played by different typical Wes Anderson actors, and you get the whole Wes Anderson aesthetic applied to Star Wars. You're seeing this across genres, right? You're seeing U.S. presidents as superheroes, and it's happening every day. You see these things begin. Harry Potter as a dystopian science fiction story, right? You get all these filters put on popular shows that we've seen before, and then they become sort of mimetic and they catch on and people copy it, and you'll see it for like 2 days online where a movie or many movies have a new filter that people think is interesting. So Samurai Japan, they'll put that filter on some movie that we've seen before, and then it looks great. You know what it is right away. You recognize what's going on, and it's really fun. But here's what I think. In the same way that when Star Wars try to retread, like a reboot, you see all these reboot movies, like The Force Awakens being a reboot of A New Hope. When it first came out, I said, well, I get why they would want to reboot it, right? The 1977 original Star Wars movie does look like an old movie now. It's sort of aged. It's still a classic, right? No one's saying it's not a classic, but when you think about young audiences, they might be taken out of the conceit of the whole story just because they can see the production value, and they can see they can sense that it was made by humans and not by magic, right? The magic is a little bit suspended, let's say. For some, I'm just guessing. For me, it's still there for the original, but I remember seeing it years ago and things like that. So those people who, so when I first saw the Force Awakens movie, I said, I get why they want to do it. It's stupid. I wish they would have an original story, but I'll give them the benefit of the doubt for one movie in order to get going again. I was worried they were just going to retread the whole series. That the second of that sequel trilogy was going to be like Empire Strikes Back. I would have taken a retread of the whole series versus what we ended up getting, which was one of the worst cinematic experiences in the history of mankind. So, especially after that terrible third movie, which is unwatchable. I mean, literally unwatchable. Just the dumbest thing ever made. So here's what I think is going to happen. We've been talking about copyright for a long time now. Remember, when we've used this frame a few times before, but I'm going to reiterate it. The printing press comes along at the same time as the separation of church and state, right? The separation of church and state happened at the same time. And the printing press had a lot to do with it, right? Gutenberg printed the Bible in German, which was a big no-no back then, because the Bible was to be printed in Latin, which was a language not a lot of people spoke, and then spoken to you by the church. A lot of people don't realize that in really Latin Catholic places like Italy, they dissuade reading the Bible, by the way. That is not like a thing people do in the Catholic Church in Italy, which is insane for most American evangelist Christians to consider that the Bible is not really heavily read in Catholic places where they still do Latin Mass and these kinds of things. Crazy to imagine, right? And so the original text only being in Latin that they translated into the vernacular was one of the local languages, German, French, and whatever, that Martin Luther translated it into German so that people could read it and then printed it so that it was readily available, is what caused that little bit of decentralization of the information, and translating into languages that local people spoke is what did it, right? That's what it wasn't just the tick, tick, tick on the wall about the edicts and the Reformation. It was also now that there was a level playing field and people could access the Bible themselves and come up with their own ideas and their own thoughts and these kinds of things. So, but coincidentally, the copyright, the entire legal regime around copyright, is born at the same time as this printing press, because now you can print so easily and things can come out and it's great, right? So from there, we see copyright become this huge thing that pushes industries forward and is very important, and it was a wonderful force for a long time and did a lot of good and made a lot of artists and artisans rich where they hadn't been before. They had to rely on patronage before the printing press, of course. What's patronage but a rich person paying you to entertain them, right? Here's a historic fact about baseball, right, that a lot of people don't know. All other sports before baseball were really just for the entertainment of rich people, right? That's how it worked. You would play a sport or entertain the court in some monarchist, British, or feudal European system. And baseball was the first sport that was just for average people. And they invented the idea of charging people a nickel or whatever it was. And they would put on a show and everyone could watch. And it was just from the ground up, right? Baseball is unique in that way. But this idea of courtly patronage for art and work versus what Mark Twain enjoyed, which was a wide reader base of normal people, right? One of the interesting anecdotes about, I'm a huge Mark Twain fan, by the way, like the biggest. One of the baseball was for hockey signs and signals. Yeah, it sure was. Baseball is the original on earth to offer tickets for public amusement of normal people. And it was in the parks in New York City where it was really invented. So very, very interesting. Whoa, drones attacking the Kremlin. Is that true? Is that happening right now? Has my prediction come true immediately? I believe. I mean, it's time. It's been a bit late. I'm surprised it took this long. Give me a confirmation in the show and I'll talk about it a bit later. So this force of decentralization coming now into copyright, I think is going to produce these results. Remember what I was saying about Star Wars? And remember this genre you're seeing in AI now where people retread movies and put like a filter on it. I think we're going to be at the point where you can actually modify old movies and have auteur versions of them, a little bit like sampling in music did, right? Remember sampling and how that completely upended the music industry still now, right? You heard in the 1990s and the 2000s and up until this day, all these little pieces taken out of old classic music and then infused into a new song, right? So I remember Can I Kick It from A Tribe Called Quest, which was based on Wild Side from Lou Reed, one of my favorite songs from the 90s. Whenever I hear it, I get all excited. And I love the original version, right? I'm a big fan of the Lou Reed original version. So what about the Roman? So the Roman gladiators also was a type of patronage that was bred in circuses. That was the rich people putting on a spectacle so that people could have a jubilee and go nuts and carry on and be nuts. So I don't know where the financing exactly came from, but as I understand, it was a form of patronage. It was like as if Bill Gates would sponsor the Super Bowl for our entertainment and then tell everyone they got to get a vaccine after. So it's not exactly the same commercial relationship. It's not far. I see what you're saying. It's not far, but it still wasn't. And I'm talking about the original form of baseball, right? Which was more circusy and more entertainment than it was necessarily just sports. The original baseball was filled with jugglers and clowns and what about not professionals, not in the way that you would think of a professional to this day, right? Not private businessmen with private athletes, all of whom are types of free agents coming together to create a commercial enterprise. Roman gladiators were specifically funded in the same way that the courtly sports of jousting, for example, right? That was for the entertainment of kings in the courtly class. Other people could come. I'm sure they invited people to the feasts and stuff like that, but the business model was still not what we would recognize as a bottom-up situation. So that's as far as I understand. There might be, I'm not an expert on Roman stuff and by any stretch of the imagination, but that's my impression. So you get this decentralizing force that's coming for the news, right? You get a decentralizing force that's coming for movies and entertainment, I think, right? I think AI and indeed the writers have opened up and the gladiators were slaves as well. Well, some of them, I think there might have been some professionals, but the whole thing was a bad business model. It was not one you're going to see replicated, and not one I think that's in any way decentralized, right? So what we're talking about here is these forces that are bringing us towards decentralization. Even think about AI for a second. I've had this thought for a while, and just bear with me for a second. I'm not sure how to articulate it, but I think there's something there. Even think of the concept of a company, right? A company. Now, in Latin languages and French, for example, we don't say company. We say, especially in law, in our laws, we think of these people as moral persons, des personnes morales, right? So when you think of a company, what you're actually talking about is a invented human being, right? That's what it is. A company is an invention that takes on certain human attributes in order for it to come into an obligation and responsibility contract. A contract is obligations and responsibilities between two parties. How do you get a group of people to come into one contract with another counterparty or another company, right? What you do is you give them the attributes of a human being, a moral person. So if they are this person and now they can, in a limited sense, take on responsibilities and obligations, you've created a type of new human being, right? So we talk about Coase theorem a lot. And Coase theorem, if you guys don't know, Coase theorem was, or theory of the firm, was a lawyer who won the Nobel Prize in economics in around 1991. He ended up living to see Bitcoin around. He was like 100 and something years old when he died in 2013 or 2012 or something like that. And so Ronald Coase was a professor with Milton Friedman at the University of Chicago. And he came up with a theory about where companies were born and where they come from. And that theory, called the Coase theorem, won him the Nobel Prize. It's about transaction externalities and all these things, but the simple way to describe it is the following. You look at a noise complaint, right? A noise complaint, you're my neighbor and well, you're making too much noise. I'm sick of it. We go to a court and the court will come down the middle. It's an easy example of how a court ought to work, right? Balancing things. It'll say to you, stop making noise past this time. And it'll say to me, don't complain about them making noise before this time, right? Say it's 11 o'clock at night, right? So they'll say to me, don't worry about him until 11. And they'll say to the other person, after 11, you got to stop because he has a right to complain, right? That's sort of I just made up all those numbers, but that's what you could probably expect from a noise complaint if it made it in front of a judge. They would come up with some reasonable accommodation for both folks and you'd move on your way. That's how the legal system's supposed to work, right? What Coase argued is that those transaction externalities, you negotiating the time, me negotiating the time, while simple, if you add variables to it, there becomes a reason, a kind of vacuum, a void, because of all these different externalities about arguments you'd have to make to consolidate into one corporate body and have your own lawyers and have your own internal capacity to get what you want. And so the way that manifests is instead of organizing different contracts with all your lawyers in order to argue for your noise rights, you now have an army of lawyers. You might even hire lobbyists. You might even go and try and change laws. And because of this, there's the reason to have a company in the first place. So people join together and then they end up swaying the balance, right? So the effect of a company and people joining together has an effect on the overall balance of power. And he argued that there was a very strong motivation to centralize because of this, because it does bring power and it does bring new capacity. So he wasn't passing necessarily a moral judgment on it. He was saying you internalize transaction externalities, little places where people could make money and were slightly inefficient, but in the benefit of an individual. So a lawyer, for example, that's why you still have a lot of lawyers working for themselves and not internalizing inside of a company, being an in-house lawyer, because now they can negotiate their income each time, and it's usually better for them based on their own ambitions and all of those things. Now, an in-house lawyer has one job. It doesn't matter how much time they spend. It's easier, right? You don't have to hustle as much. And you have usually support and aid and effort and all of those things combined, and things get done. But what we're saying is that the transaction externality part because of Bitcoin and because of these decentralizing forces is actually going away. The reason to have a company because of technological progress is going way down. And so you have all of these instances now where individuals like Tucker Carlson or like someone who's good at AI prompting is going to be able to make, with the same faces, you could make a retread of Star Wars, the original movie, using AI. And I believe, I mean, we're not quite there, but how much longer before you can have a modernized version with some aesthetic veneer on top of it of the old Star Wars movie, and it would look modern, except the actors would be just pictures from the old days, and it would be the same people and all that. We've already seen the deepfake technology used to bring back young characters like Luke Skywalker and things like that. I'm predicting an individual will be able to do this, and the studios themselves, like Disney, aren't going to be able to keep up. Individual, I mean, they got to deal with the writers now, right? The writers' strike is one of these transaction externalities. That is Coase theorem right there. Now, it makes sense within the thrust of creating a company for unions to form, which we're not anti-collective bargaining. I think collective bargaining is everyone's right? If you want to collectively bargain with people in the same cohort, go for it. Like, that's, I don't have a problem with that, right? And so the collective bargaining that's going on, I think, is unaware of the technological advances that are happening, which will allow for fewer writers and more talented people to have way more output than they ever had before. Now, I continue to think that the in the same way that sampling became litigious, right? Artists suing people who used pieces of music to compose new pieces, really confusing stuff, right? But I think you're going to see a lot of it in video, and it's going to continue and be a really big deal. But that's not the only force. So we've got it in the news. We've got it in entertainment, I think, right? These forces towards decentralization. But let's hear what Balaji has to say. So Balaji, I don't know if you guys saw, he had the BitSignal, right? The $1 million bet about the price of Bitcoin. And now he admitted what I said on the show, not that I was mind reading, but I did say that the point Balaji was trying to make was just to bring attention. I don't think he was ever serious about Bitcoin hitting $1 million by 90 days, right? And so here's what he indeed says. We don't need to mind read him anymore. He says exactly what I said he was going to say. I just burned $1 million to tell you they're printing trillions. So that's been his slogan, right? I just burned $1 million to tell you they're burning trillions. I thought the whole thing was a publicity stunt to get attention, to get people to talk about this stuff. The $1 million bet is now closed out by mutual agreement. So he paid the person. I made $1 million plus in provable on-chain donations, which you can verify by clicking the links below. So first of all, any of these nobodies who came out and doubted Balaji that he would ever pay, that he was some kind of sneaky bastard trying to scam people on a bet, can just get the hell out of the conversation. Don't listen to these people anymore. If someone was out there when Balaji was ringing the bat signal and they're like, oh, they're as dumb as the people worried about Elon Musk losing $44 billion on Twitter. They're that dumb, right? If you're sitting around worried about Elon Musk's investment in Twitter, and that's all that you think the thing was about, you're too stupid to be in the conversation. You got to go. You can't be around, right? And if you know someone like that, oh, Elon lost 44 billion on Twitter, just cancel your conversation with them. Talk about something else, because they're not ready, right? Their brain is just T-Rex size, right? T-Rex brain. So, and it's the same with Balaji. When people said, oh, he's scamming, he's not going to pay, it was clear. It was clear the thing was for attention. What's $1 million to Balaji? Nothing, right? Balaji was heavily involved in, I know, because when he wrote the filing to be a public company, I was working on a very similar document for Kraken. And I took great pleasure in that his document looked a lot like mine. We'd come up with a lot of similar ideas and conclusions about how to make money as an exchange, and what the revenue streams were, and all these projections and things like that. So I've known Balaji for a long time, and through different channels and communications. When I was at CoinDesk, he was an advisor to the event for the content. So I've been on calls with him about what we should talk about, right? And he's always been generous with his time about those things. And so when I saw this, I said, well, he's out to get attention and to put a focus on a thing. He doesn't care about the $1 million. The point is to get the conversation going. He's made a point of saying, look, these things are happening. They're lying. They're printing way more money. So he says, so I spent my own money to send a provably costly signal that there's something wrong with the economy and that it's not going to be a soft landing like Powell promises, but something much worse. And so he ended up giving 1.5 million. He gave $500,000 to Bitcoin Core developers, as I understand. So I have not verified all this stuff, but it looks on-chain provable. I believe him, right? I have no reason to doubt him. If someone out there says this is all a scam, please tell me, but I don't think so. Now, Jason Calacanis comes back and says catastrophists, right? So they're calling now Balaji a catastrophist. Catastrophists aren't always wrong, just 99% plus of the time. Balaji points out a number of challenging issues, but all of them are surmountable if we control spending and technology continues to bail us out with massive efficiency gains. So Balaji responds and says, this is the right discussion to have. I agree that if we control spending and technology continues to bail us out, then everything's fine. So he's saying, yeah, I would bet on human beings, right? What I always say is, what's our best resource? What's the best resource we have in the world? The greatest resource in the world, right? Is it energy, nuclear power? Is it lithium ion for batteries? None of that's true. The best resource we have is our brain. It's our ingenuity and our creativity. That's the best. There's nothing better than that on planet Earth. It's the greatest resource we have by a mile. And we can solve all kinds of problems because of that, because this is an unlimited resource. We have it in excess if the conditions are right and human minds aren't broken and they're not writing Vice headlines and worried about NPR getting shadow banned by Elon Musk and worried about Elon Musk's $44 billion, right? Oh, he lost it. What an idiot, right? As long as your brain isn't stuck on stupid things like that, and you have I always believe creativity, for example, people try to optimize for creativity. I have a bit of a different approach. My whole thing about creativity is removing obstacles. As long as you don't have any of the stupid shit in front of you, right? You can be creative. As long as you get rid of, I have to do this and I have this obligation and all of those things, then you actually create the opportunity for creativity. So I'm an obstacle remover, organizer for creativity. If I get things off my plate, I can be creative. If I get responsibilities and obligations away from me, through achieving them, through abandoning them or whatever, then I can be creative, right? It's not about some magic cocktail of inspiration and passion. I mean, that's all stupid, right? It's getting the boring things out of your way so you can focus on creativity and then you'll get there. But let's get back to what Balaji says. So he says, I agree that if we control spending and technology continues to bail us out, then everything is fine. But then he says, but A, the establishment is blocking new technology, and B, it is not controlling spending. So Jason Calacanis can go wish on a genie all he wants on his all-in pod, and he's still going to be as out of touch with reality as he is now. It's just not possible. The two things he says, the catastrophist is wrong 99% of the time, because it's so simple. We just have to embrace technology and stop spending the money we don't have. You tell low IQ Joe Biden that, right? You tell low IQ Joe Biden that he's just got to do all this stuff and it'll be fine, right? So it's never going to happen. And even as far as controlling spending, look at this story from New York Times. So, New York has income tax of its own, right? New York has its own income tax. It's like 4 or 5% if you live in New York City. It's a lot, right? I remember paying it and I hated it. I just got so angry about it. So here's what the New York Post says. The New York's income sinks by 16 billion compared to pre-COVID as residents flee at an alarming rate. Like, I don't pay it anymore. I'm not the only one. Who's paying that right now? Everyone got out of there who could afford it and are not paying this thing anymore. So the dangers to what Jason Calacanis said, we just need to limit spending. There's even another one, the jurisdictional arbitrage. People leave. They don't want to pay this stuff, right? Who wants to support Clown World after the past few years? It's my goal not to fund them. It's my goal. I want to give them zero. I don't even, especially Canada, right? I don't want to give Canada anything. They don't deserve $1 for being that stupid. Nothing. It's over. Done. I'm done with them, right? And I'm not the only one. It's a bunch of people like that. And I think most Bitcoiners are looking a way out to paying taxes. And luckily, we have some people talking about banning the IRS or dismantling the IRS, right? You've got Vivek talking about that and others, right? There's people talking about starting over and all that stuff. But this is another one of those trends. And here's the technology one, right? So you get all these folks now talking about energy use, right? And it looks like the Biden administration is going to put a 30% tax, a climate change tax on mining, on Bitcoin mining. It looks serious. We laughed about it a little while ago. I think they're going to keep trying to go through with it. We never said they weren't serious about it, but we laughed about it, right? We thought it was dumb. Steve Barbour says, who will be a speaker at Bitcoin 2023, he says, distributed small-scale mining cannot be targeted, taxed in any reasonable way. A black box in every home. So right away, you can start to see if they do actually go after some of the big miners, we're going to have even more decentralization in our industry. It's another one of these things, just like in art, just like in news, the technological tools to decentralize are being forced into utilization. There's now pressure towards decentralization because of the writer's strike, because of stupid taxes on Bitcoin mining, and because of idiots running news sites and not doing their job, right? Because they're part of this group that mutualizes corporate responsibility and doesn't need strong talent anymore. So you have this whole motivation now towards this stuff, right? And I think what Balaji did was bring a lot of attention and try and get everyone on board to this. But these are just important decentralizing forces. Now, what about this one, right? So we've been hearing for a long time about our corrupt Congress in America, insider trading at a rate that we have never even contemplated in previous eras. We get Nancy Pelosi with her famous, "Isn't it a free country?" when people just criticized her for making so much money trading stocks and insider trading on things she knew and had foreknowledge about. But look at this, right? Isn't this one of the most beautiful things you've ever seen in America? This happened yesterday. AOC and Matt Gaetz introduced a bipartisan bill to ban Congress members from owning stocks, right? They're banning Congress, the thing that everyone agrees on, that these people shouldn't be trading. Bipartisanship has brought a bill forward. Now, I don't know if it'll pass, but seeing Gaetz and AOC together is a very powerful combination. And it has a little bit to do with what I'm predicting, right? I've been talking a lot about Vivek and RFK sort of teaming up, right? I think that's going to happen. I know it sounds crazy, but from where I'm sitting, the primaries are going to work their way through. It looks like Joe Biden's going to hide in his basement. There won't be any debates. RFK won't be able to take any punches at him. He'd hit him too easily, so it wouldn't be, I get why they're not fighting. I don't expect it to happen, Again, like this absurd Lex Friedman thing where we're going to get a Lex Friedman and Joe Biden 3-hour conversation. I mean, kill yourself. It's not happening, right? So seeing this actually happen, these two people come together, I think is a harbinger of things to come. And you can already start to see it. So the BitSignal, again, go back to the BitSignal about the absolute incredulity of our government and all the policies now, even on taxing miners, on everything that's going on with the Biden administration. And Caitlin Long brings up this point because it turns out that RFK, speaking very intelligently on the same home miner situation, right? So what has RFK said? So RFK has said that Ellen Brown makes a strong case that well, no, that's not the right one. Here it is. Yeah. So he's talking about the shutdown of the crypto industry by the apparent shutdown, the choke point 2.0 talking points that we've heard so much about. So here's what Robert Kennedy says. Ellen Brown makes a strong case the FDIC, SEC war on crypto caused failures of the Silicon Valley Bank signature and Silvergate banks. FDIC and SEC have no authority to wage an extra legal war on crypto that leaves major banks as collateral damage. And then Neil Fizzy H2O says, I thought that you were an environmentalist. As you know, crypto uses an enormous amount of energy that outweighs any of its benefits. And Kennedy says, this is a misunderstanding, but thanks for raising the issue. I'll post on it this week. look, you're going to get some interesting stuff here, right? That's quick learning. That's him not falling into the same partisan talking points. That's him embracing environmentalism and the load-bearing nature of Bitcoin. That's him saying what a lot of people know, right? That this rush towards centralization is one of the main problems, right? And here's what Kurt Bowerly says about it, right? About the New York Times hit piece, and same name as me, so he's a cool guy. Having a fully deployable, location agnostic, 24/7 flexible buyer of energy available as the world tries to engineer and fund the building of the infrastructure required to green the planet is so obviously beneficial that the only question ought to be, does it really do that? Duh. And indeed, that's why you've got people saying that, right? And you've got now Robert Kennedy also. So that's just with the mining thing on the 30% tax and what could happen, and decentralization of mining, and another motivation to decentralize, and another thrust in the direction of decentralization. Remember, our frame for World War III is literally centralization versus decentralization. That's World War III, right? Robert Kennedy here says, the banking collapse is the tip of an economic mega crisis. It's not just the banks. Job openings plummeted for the third month in a row. Core factory orders dropped for the second consecutive month. Inflation is destroying the middle and working class. We need to turn our attention on rebuilding our nation now. So you get those two statements, right? And now they've both, so RFK also coming out swinging against CBDCs. A lot of this sounds a lot like what Vivek is saying about CBDCs and other things that need to go and not even be considered. So Caitlin Long says this. It says, it sure does look like the powers that be in the US don't want the regional banks to survive. This is about the banking stuff we've seen in the past few days. And JP Morgan, for example, getting funded to pick up a smaller regional bank and get richer. The powers that be seem to love their too big to fail banks. And here's the important part. Challenger president candidates on both sides of the aisle are taking up the issue. This is good. So you get both RFK, challenger, you get Vivek, challenger, you get DeSantis, challenger. The challengers are squarely focused on political corruption, economic corruption, and decentralizing, more or less decentralizing the banking system, or at least fighting against centralization. You know, you can go and some people have been talking about the creature from Jekyll Island a lot. Another reason why I believe Bitcoin is going to be the main topic in the 2024 elections. The main topic. It's all anyone's going to be talking about. Here's what you can see from with all the fighting going on, right? With all this consolidation of banks. Mark Harvey writes about the creature from Jekyll Island, which is the history of the Federal Reserve being created on Jekyll Island in 1912 and 1913. Currently reading the creature from Jekyll Island. Reading this book during times of banking failures is pretty eerie. The biggest insight I've gained so far is that the banking crisis and bailout by FDIC, the Fed, is something that happens again and again and again. The system is designed with bank bailouts in mind. In my opinion, this is a great time to read the book. Not only is it designed for bank bailouts in mind, it has a natural tendency towards consolidation and centralization, which I'm arguing here is opposite to the current that we see most things moving in, right? So we have these two currents at the same time, decentralization, centralization. I continue to believe it's our job to simply win this race, right? Win the race, win with decentralized services, with decentralized money being the more attractive option, and then just simply gathering people. You know, a lot of people are, you know, the catastrophists. I'm an accelerationist, but not a catastrophist. And I don't think Balaji is a catastrophist either. My stress for years now has only been not whether the fiat system collapses. I think it's inevitable, right? It's whether or not we're ready to take up the slack. It's our job to almost make it so that people don't notice in a material way a debasement in quality of life, even though we're already experiencing a debasement in quality of life, I would say. But that there are more attractive things so that we grow, so that it's not a collapse. It's actually just a jettisoning of the old systems in favor of the new ones because they're more attractive. Now, if you're in the news business, as I said, it's possible. If you're in the movie business, it's about to be possible, right? And if you're in the money business, it looks like we're already there, because we're going to do it with energy, and we're going to decentralize, and we're going to be able to create these things. So the tools for decentralization are all around us, and the capacity for us to decentralize is becoming more and more relevant. It's even going into the food, right? It's even going into the food. You see what's going on in the Dutch system, right? The EU has given the Dutch government the green light to buy 3,000 farms by offering them 120% of the market value, so that they voluntarily sell, but they're banned. So here's the kicker. Under the schemes, the beneficiaries guarantee that the closure of their production capacity is definitive and irreversible, and that they will not start the same breeding activity elsewhere in the Netherlands or within the EU. As Peter St. Onge, who's been great lately, says, EU is literally buying out farmers and making them promise to never farm again unless they emigrate abroad, where presumably cows also fart. So look, they are going to move abroad. Farmers are going to farm, right? They're going to move. We have a ton of Dutch farmers in Canada and always have. They love coming here to farm. They like our, centralized dairy system, but that's another story. So we got a lot of them in Canada, and the trend is there, right? The trend is absolutely happening. The goal to centralize food looks like it's going to create an equal and opposite reaction, where you get more and more Americans interested in smashing the grocery store cartel and embracing local farming. And that's why it's a theme in our show in Miami. That's why I mention it here all the time. That's why I shop directly with farmers. And I think a lot of Bitcoiners shop directly with farmers, and that's going to continue, right? It's all part of this trend. And that's what Balaji's BitSignal was about helping push this conversation around decentralization all over the place. Because indeed, as Jason Kalkanis points out, we wouldn't need to think about decentralization if the powers that be would just bet on technology, which they don't, and would stop spending money. They're not going to do either of those things, right? So it's a moot point. All right, that's what I got for today. That's all the news that I could find that I thought was interesting. Let me know if I missed anything. We got decentralization in politics. Oh yeah, so the prediction, again, let me just get to that one prediction. We saw the bipartisan piece with AOC and Matthew Gaetz. My prediction is they're gonna keep going with the primaries, right? And they're gonna get treated unfairly. And in the end, I think you're gonna have a bipartisan ticket. I think there's an appetite out there for something totally new. And I think that ends, I was always, the frame of the fourth turning, for example, tells us that the political party in charge gets wiped out for years afterwards. They get punished. I think they both get punished this time. I think both parties get absolutely dragged by a bipartisan system. And I could see people like AOC and Matthew Gaetz and all of these folks jumping on board to this bipartisan system because I think they feel the force of decentralization around them. It's hard to ignore, right? As I called yesterday's breakup, right? Bitcoiners can feel the energy shifting, and it's shifting towards decentralization. You see the momentum going towards things that are promoting more energy in the camp of the decentralized groups. It's big, right? And all I see on the centralizing forces is raw power and force and authoritarian commands, and it's just not going to hold up, right? All right, let's see what we got here. So I'm back to the gladiators part, so I think I can go from there. I was pretty the news is a little jarring, don't you think? No, I mean the centralization part of the news is what's jarring, I think. Especially now that we've trained ourselves in the past through COVID, for example, to notice Moscow time and fake news. I like the Murray Gell-Mann amnesia effect. I sort of thought like half the news was kind of real, and when just a little while ago, right? I would have, for example, never doubted the moon landing. Legitimately, I knew people doubted it, but now I'm just like, these people are insane. They'd lie about anything, right? So who knows? They also had chariots, yeah. That's the fighters. Russian media accused Ukraine of drone attacks. My original prediction on the Ukraine war was that Russia wouldn't even attack because drones would attack mainland Russia back. So on Putin's residence, wow. I think, he's got a lot of residences. I met the Boris Nemtsov, who was the former prime minister under Yeltsin before Putin came on the scene. Really cool guy. He got killed. They shot him in the head in front of the Kremlin. But I got to spend an afternoon with him in Canada years ago during the 2012 protests in Moscow. And his presentation to our parliament in Canada was all about Putin's many homes and that he was the richest man in the world. And he had evidence of all, and he had unflattering pictures of all of his plastic surgery and stuff like that. It was a good presentation. He's a cool guy. You just described one of Marxism's greatest critiques, the way corporations become human or have rights like a human. Yeah, that is what I mean. That was like the first AI, like that it becomes a type of AI, and we're going to get rid of that. That's my prediction. We're going to get rid of the creation of fictional humans in order to enter our obligations and responsibilities. Not out of rules. I just think it'll go out of fashion. It's not going to be as important in the future. We're going to individuate more, and the cognitive capacity of AI will allow us to break the bonds of corporations and be more personally responsible and less corporate responsibility in the overall equation. I mean, it's going to take a long time, right? That's not an overnight thing, but the trend looks that way. It looks that way. That's what I see anyway. And indeed, look, Marxism only gets things wrong. Well, not only, it's got a lot of stupid things, but where Marxism gets it wrong is that wealth is based on other people's poverty, right? It doesn't understand the plus nature of how capitalism ought to work. You know how the Marxists would criticize Steve Jobs, for example. Oh, Steve Jobs never gave money away. The guy solved global illiteracy by putting a microchip in almost everyone's pocket. And I agree, not everyone has an Apple, but everyone copied his idea and created the smartphone and the tablet and the cheap hardware. So he solved global illiteracy. I don't care if he's rich. I mean, everyone else got literate. Who cares how much money Steve Jobs made, right? I don't care. I wish his wife wouldn't have spent it on the Atlantic, but I don't even care about that. I can't say, I don't think we should be encouraging AI and writing too much. It creates a bit too strong a feedback loop for control of the humans. Well, Ollie, my feeling about it is that as long as I predict that we're going to take the human path with AI, that AI will be like our third eye and we'll train it ourselves. So what you're saying here is corporate AI, which I 100% agree with. It is more of this, like I'm going on a limb here. I understand it's not exactly accurate, but I'm saying that the corporate body is a form of AI. And if you give it cognitive powers through its own ownership of AI, of course it's going to subjugate people. That's what I read into the letter that Elon Musk signed. The corporate training of AI had a head start. My read was not because there was something mysterious about AI technology. It was the business model that was getting too far of a head start, and you want to see some other forms of it take shape. Now, Brian Rommel has been behind the personalized AI. I think personalized AI is going to be the way to go, and that there is a human path, that it is simply grafted to each individual human, and we end up trusting it and having a relationship and loving it. I think it's going to love us, and we're going to love it, but it'll be your own, right? It'll be something you train, almost like a family member. I think your AI is going to be you're not going to switch them out for others. It'll be intimate, and you'll trust it, and it will trust you, and it will love you, and you'll love it, right? That's how I see it. So in that way, I agree 100% with what you're saying, Ollie, but there's another path out there that is beneficial to individuals and is super decentralizing. So indeed, the corporate body powered with AI is not where we want to go. We don't want corporations training the AI and then using them against us. Not fun. Yeah, exactly, Ollie. We don't want we don't want that. We don't want that. We don't want it. Yeah, amazing. If they try killing mining, it only becomes stronger. Yeah, we're talking about the 30%. Yeah, I mean, it's what I want. I was with the leader of Foundry, the CEO of Foundry, which operates the biggest mining pool in the world. I interviewed him in Texas last week, and off stage we were talking about the dangers of centralization in mining as participants go belly up. Or as they went belly up over the winter. And you don't want that, right? You don't want any 51% attacks even possible. They will find a way around it. The information is what is valuable. Yeah. I wish someone would make a miner that I could use to heat my hot tub. Well, apparently, bud, the home heating ones are getting better and better, so I'm into that. It's like the Oprah meme. You get a bailout and you get a bailout. It sure is. Hunger Games incoming. I hope not. The farming stuff is so... Sometimes I can't believe this stuff is real. Yeah, I mean, these Canadians like it. I mean, I meet people that are proud that they're saving the environment now because they're vegetarians. That's common in Canada. It's hilarious. I mean, imagine sending your kids to those schools. There's like vegetarian lunch all day. Could you imagine? I'm in the music business and we had to readjust. We got rid of the rent seekers. Yeah, look, individual humans are going to create more and more from this. I believe that, right? There's all new forms of creation, so it's going to happen. The human path is that. The human path is an individual with AI creating at a clip we haven't seen before. Dutch are fighting back, though, at least. Yeah, they're going to win. Yeah, they're going to win. I think it must be another farmer to force the use of their GMO crops. Could be. Yeah, could be. Well, everybody gave their money. I wonder what that was for. Everyone gave their money voluntary. I don't know what you mean, Bitcoin Graffiti. I forget what I was talking about in reference to that. Everyone gave their money voluntarily. Maybe to that farming, to Steve. Oh. I'm a little lost. Oh, yeah. Steve Jobs. Yeah, you're talking about the... Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no. I mean, so what if Steve Jobs got rich solving global illiteracy? Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, if everyone gives him $200, yet everyone in the world can read now, win, right? Let him be rich. Who cares? That's why I won't complain about his wife in Atlantic. I need the sources for Moscow time now, so I'm kind of glad he did it, especially with Vice gone. That's a source. Supposedly Epstein was using AI for money laundering. Yeah, I believe it. Yeah, we made him rich. All right, team, I went a little late today. I'll see you all tomorrow. I should be in Montreal tomorrow. Probably going to Montreal tonight. Probably. So, and I'll be getting a studio set up there. So we'll be in one place for a little while. Even though I'm on my way to Miami, we'll have that place for the next few months while we work on the farm in Vermont. All right, everyone. Peace. Whoops. Let me just get this up. I like to get up one of these ones at the end just because it stays on the broadcast. And there you go.